I am Nina van Tilburg for National Security News. The National Health Laboratory Service, the NHLS of South Africa, a government-run network of healthcare testing laboratories, is currently battling to recover from a ransomware attack that disrupted the system and deleted backups. Chris Bateman, a South African medical journalist and editor, was contacted by the hackers known as Black Suit, who claim responsibility for the breach. Well, in our studio, we have Chris and Blake Cahen, the Director of Cybersecurity at IronNet, to discuss the incident and explore Black Suit's role in other hacks worldwide. Hi to both of you. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, Chris Bateman, a journalist in South Africa, can we start with you on how the hackers contacted you after this ransomware demand?
Sure. 2 Saturdays ago, this incident happened. They hacked into the NHLS national system and basically crippled it. And I reported on it for Healthy News, one of the people I work for. And the hackers must have seen it because underneath they put my website and stuff. So it was fairly easy for them to get hold of me. And out of the blue, this guy just dropped in very heavy Eastern European accent, speaking very fast as well. So he was almost unintelligible. And I had to say to him, listen, slow down. I've got to work out who you are in the mix. Are you an angry doctor who can't treat his patients? I've got to work out who you are. So he slowed down. And finally, I got out of him that he described himself as a middleman between the hackers and the NHLS. And he basically, his message to me was, please convey to the CEO of the NHLS who we've interviewed that they must use the link we provided to make contact. He didn't specify any demands. The only demand at that stage was that they wanted to make contact to discuss a way forward with them. He also said that we can restore the data in a couple of hours. Otherwise, it's going to cost you millions of euros. And the NHLS CEO confirmed it would take 3 weeks for them to build in better grade anti-hack, anti-ransomware.
Sure, Chris. And they contact you subsequently again?
Yeah, I 2 or 3 nights ago, I've lost track of time now, but about 25 past 10 the one evening, we were watching television, the phone rang. And this time, he was a lot clearer and spoke a lot slower. And he simply said, I want to give you a link and I want you to pass that on to the NHLS. So I went into my office and very carefully noted down the spelling and the forward slashes and the dots and made sure that was right. And then started to quiz him. And, what do you guys want? And he said, no, Mr. Bateman, no questions. So I said, well, what do you want besides making contact? He said, no, I'm not answering any other questions. And that was the end of it.
And the South Africans, they said they're not going to pay the ransom.
Well, I don't even know that. All I know is that what Lisana said to me the first time I actually contacted her, she hasn't responded to my subsequent estimate.
Sorry, Chris, this is the CEO of the laboratory.
Sorry, I'll give you the South Africa. Professor Kolek of Lisana, yeah. And she said that the IT advice was do not open that link. And they're following that advice because, like as I know anyway, you don't follow a strange link, you Trojan horse, all the rest. So they, as far as I know, and I haven't checked in either with the health minister or the CEO of the health laboratory services today, they haven't made a subsequent contact, nor do I know whether she picked up the link I sent her.
So what effect did this have on the services in South Africa?
Well, it's widespread and debilitating. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that blood and pathology tests are a basic tool for any doctor. And anything from scans and radiology through to TB, HIV, we have some of the highest loads in the world of both. Diabetes, particularly dangerous. We have the second highest fatality behind TB is diabetes. And for people with certain kinds of diabetes, they need 3 blood tests a day or they can die, the more serious cases. So, across the board, whether it's operations to check for liver function or kidney function before an operation, whatever it is, viral loads, blood is absolutely crucial. And doctors are really, really upset. The South African healthcare system is the public healthcare system. This has not affected the private, I emphasize. is dysfunctional. It has some incredibly good clinicians because they work under extreme pressure and they are world class, a lot of them. But the system, the backup, the equipment, the administration, you've got ANC cadre deployment, ANC being the former ruling government, and it's quite dysfunctional. So the doctors, a lot of whom emigrate every year, are short-staffed and under enormous pressure. And this is not something they need at this stage.
Well, Blake, can we turn to you? Is this unusual to go ask a journalist or somebody in between for a demand for ransom?
No, I wouldn't think so. It just speaks volumes to the fact that, they got something as big as a health provider and they're not getting any kind of communication back from, the victim in this case. They just want the money at the end of the day. And, they can release the data, but most of the time they get nothing back from that. That's the threat in order to extort that, the money. So if they're not getting that in the communication, they're going to grow more frustrated. They're going to keep reaching out and do anything they can to get that contact in order to hopefully get the ransom.
And what should somebody like Chris do? I mean, should he break off contact with them and tell them he's not this intermediary that they're looking for?
That's one of those gray areas. That's difficult because if he cuts off contact and then, they deliver some sort of critical information that doesn't get back to, the victim or, the proper authorities, then, what happens in that type of scenario? Morally, it's very easy to feel bad and feel like you're helping the attackers in this case. But, that information in the flow, it's up to the victim, the government, the authorities to decide what to do with it. But, information is power.
So, Chris, you've been approached by the security authorities called the Hawks in South Africa. Are they trying to? What are they? What do they want you to do in this case?
Right now, they're going through the usual motions security people do. Hawks captain called me and said, "Can he come and see me?" He didn't realize he's in Johannesburg and we were a couple of thousand kilometers away in Cape Town. And so he's going to send somebody around. I haven't had any further contact. What they want is an affidavit. They want a sworn affidavit as to what happened. They're not aware of the second call, but they want a sworn affidavit. They're obviously collecting evidence. What I haven't told you is that there were two. This is the NHLS CEO, Professor Mnasana, shared with me that in fact two of her junior employees also got phone calls from a similar sounding accented guy with almost identical demands.
Okay, so Blake, can we look at this attack? Is this unusual? Have you heard of Black Suit?
Yeah, actually, in the United States, just in the past couple of weeks, there was a fairly large attack against a software as a service company that provides the sales software to car dealerships. That's caused inability nationwide for car dealerships to sell cars. And they were supposed to get it back online this past week, actually, but they fell victim to a second attack. Very similar, right? They're going to target, something that's going to have wide impact in order to maximize the potential that they're going to get a high dollar ransom. Or, in the case of, medical, this car dealership one, governments, if you shut down something that has, critical impact, you're maximizing the chance that they're just going to pay their way to getting operations back online.
So what is your experience? How many companies or even government organizations like this? Well, how many actually pay the ransom?
I think that everyone would like to say that you never pay the ransom, but in reality, it comes down to, the decision maker saying, how much is it going to cost to get back online? Do we have the proper backups or the capability to get back online? And if that plus or minus is less than the ransom or greater, they're going to make the decision based on the financial applicability.
So why do these attacks happen? Are these systems not secure enough? Because there was today the National Health Service in the United Kingdom that one of the former cyber security chiefs warned that their system isn't secure and they've also been hacked. So, what is wrong? Why are these big organizations that have such critical data, why are they being attacked?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in this day and age, cybersecurity budgets keep getting constrained, resources lowered. And so you have a constant battle where the defenders need to be right 100% of the time. The attackers only need to be right once. So when you have, huge organizations, with, a large volume of infrastructure, you're going to have software, infrastructure, devices that are unpatched. They're in the cycle to be, updated, but, maybe the time doesn't get allocated, the resources, maybe you don't have the funding for the tool or, the people you need to do that. And so, the attackers, they might be focused on specific entities, but they're going to hedge their bets, across a wide range of targets because they only need to get right once.
Why would they go for critical services like this? Because, people's lives are at stake.
Yeah, I've heard in the past that certain groups, would specifically stay away from healthcare because generally, if you target healthcare, that puts you on the map in a much worse way than any other type of organization. But at the same time, if you start taking down healthcare services, that data is very valuable from a ransom perspective. If you leak people's healthcare data, also if you shut down healthcare operations, that is one of the most critical services. So, the chance of you getting a high dollar ransom and actually getting the ransom also probably increases.
Well, if you go after the health service of, say, the United States or the United Kingdom, that might make sense. But you're going after an African country, which is they normally not rich.
Yeah. And at the same time, in this case, their infrastructure wasn't as updated. So, for an attacker, maybe they don't necessarily know how, wealthy or not wealthy the organization is. They just know it's a big organization. It's going to have these critical infrastructure, critical services. It's whatever they can do to try and get money back. And at the end of the day, if they ask for 5 million and then the people say, the organization, the decision makers say, we'll do 1 million, that's still $1 million. They just want the contact and they just want anything back.
So, but if you keep on paying, you keep on feeding them.
Absolutely. And that's why, governments and people, decision makers, say, don't pay the ransom. But, it's a hard place to be. Everyone that's not victim to the ransom says, if you don't pay the ransom, these people, these actors are not going to have the motive in the future because there's no monetary incentive. But then the victims have to lose money, figure out how to get operations back online, deal with, all of the fallout from, did sensitive information get disclosed? Was it, a fault of lack of security practices control? So it's a very difficult position to be in on both sides.
Chatting to people, stakeholders here, that they say that the banks and the big corporations in South Africa, according to them, and I haven't actually had it concretely verified, but the banks and the big corporations actually, as you mentioned earlier, they pay the ransom because it's a cost-effective solution. They look at it all, and in this case, you've got 3-week delay before you can actually get a refurbished, more secure system up. Whereas in a couple of hours, you can have it back up and pay the ransom. And if you compare the numbers, it makes sense to pay the ransom. But again, you've got that, are you encouraging them syndrome at play?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have any statistics, but I think one of the advantages, especially if you have no reporting requirements, you're not a publicly traded company or, large enough to, have to report certain things. If you have a cybersecurity incident and you pay a ransom, you might not be required to even report that, right? Depending on what kind of data was accessed or anything else, there could be that whole thing in play as well. So, in terms of how many pay, how many don't, in the past 6 months or so, I think there's been some pretty notable, cybersecurity or ransomware events that, it seems like the ransom was paid, but that's one of those things where I don't think many organizations outwardly say, yeah, we paid a ransom. It's kind of like, yeah, we mitigated it.
So what would your advice be for a service like this, for a critical service? How do they prevent a recurrence, and how should they deal with this case?
So in terms of, best practices, if you're a victim of ransomware, backups, are kind of the baseline. You have to have good backups. Implementing them is a whole other issue. But, if you don't have, something to, implement after, ransomware event, you really have nowhere to go. But, obviously best security practices, security controls, making sure your infrastructure, especially anything touching, the internet, public facing, is up to date, patched with any, recent vulnerabilities. And then, making sure that your environment, your cybersecurity ecosystem is, as protected and safeguarded as it can be. In terms of what to do after you get ransomed, the IR is critically important. It is very well known that once actors get into the network, even if you pay the ransom, they could still be there, wait, a month, 3 months, 6 months, and then, attack again and double extort you. So you want to make sure that they're out, and you want to make sure that you understand completely how they got in so that you can mitigate that vulnerability and ensure that, nobody else gets it.
Just explain IR to us.
Oh, sorry. Incident response. So after you get attacked, you have, a third party come in most cases, a third party, and they're going to, do a full sweep, identify, what the initial access was, what the actors did on the network, and then help advise you in next steps.
So the companies that do get hacked, that come to people like you and say, we need to jack up our systems, do they get hacked once? Or are there companies organizations that get hacked more than once?
Absolutely. And that's why, governments and people, decision makers, say don't pay the ransom. But, it's a hard place to be. Everyone that's not victim to the ransom says, if you don't pay the ransom, these people, these actors are not going to have the motive in the future because there's no monetary incentive. But then the victims have to lose money, figure out how to get operations back online, deal with, all of the fallout from, did sensitive information get disclosed? Was it, a fault of lack of security practices and control? So it's a very difficult position to be in on both sides.
Blake, so the countries that these hackers come from, so if Chris says this guy had a strong Eastern European accent, do we just assume that it's Russia?
No, it's very attribution. One of the most difficult things, and that's why there's only a couple of big names in cybersecurity that can be trusted with attribution. It's very easy to mislead. You can mimic the tactics and techniques of, another actor to kind of throw off percent. You can, use a language of a different, country to kind of throw things off. So attribution is one of those things where it takes a lot of time and you need a very high level of confidence and experience to do so. In terms of the accent, it sounds like this was a middleman. So, who knows, what that person's connection to the true, entities behind this are.
Well, also the interesting thing, if you look at some of these hacks, it's not an overnight over story. They seem to drag on for a long time. Because if you look at the Snowflake hack, I mean, that is still ongoing.
Yeah. I mean, the initial compromise, the initial hack. So in this case, a government medical service, that is impactful. That's going to resolve. It's probably going to take, weeks to months to fully resolve. But then, there's the tertiary effects of that hack. They have probably a large volume of data. Now, the ransom may get paid, maybe they don't disclose it, but that group still has that data, regardless of if they put that on the dark web or use it themselves. That is a pool of data they can use for, additional attacks. Maybe it's spear phishing campaigns using that, sensitive medical data. Maybe they're going to sell that, and then that causes impacts. Who knows? Do they have social security numbers? It is a never ending, stream from that initial, compromise.
So why do these hacks happen?
Yeah, there are a couple different scenarios. It could be a phishing campaign, phishing, spear phishing, where the ransomware actors get information about, somebody within the organization that may have, advanced privileges or access. They get them to click a link, download a program, they're in the computer, and then they move laterally. In this case, based on the article you sent me, it may be that they had unpatched systems that were accessible through the internet. A publicly disclosed vulnerability may have been used, and that got them access into the network. And then they, move laterally to infect the rest of the network. In general, it seems like more and more there are failed security practices. I know, Snowflake was the lack of basic security protocols, password reset requirements, no two-factor authentication. In this case, maybe it was unpatched, security products. Again, you're always on the back foot. The attacker only has to get right once, where you have to be right, 100% of the time as the defender. But basic security, practices, protocols seem to be, failing a lot of these notable organizations that are getting hacked.
Blake Cahen, Chris Bateman, thank you so much for speaking to us.
You're welcome. Thank you, Blake.